Imagine standing in Ethiopia and looking at a giant stone monument carved more than 1,500 years ago. Now imagine that this isn't the remains of the city, it's just what's left of it. Because beneath the modern streets, there are traces of a city that once connected Africa to some of the richest trade networks in the ancient world. And today, Theo is going to rebuild it. Hey, I'm Theo, and today we're not just talking about history, we're trying to actually see it, piece by piece. Because here's the thing about Aksum. Most people have never even heard of it, but archaeologists and historians describe it as one of the most powerful states in the ancient world, ranked alongside Rome, Persia, and China. Yeah, I said Rome. That's not an exaggeration. That's actually how ancient writers ranked it. Aksum was the capital of the Aksumite kingdom, here on Ethiopia's Tigray Plateau. At its height, it controlled trade routes stretching from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean, from Arabia to the heart of Africa. So why haven't more people heard about it? Honestly, that's part of what makes this story worth telling. Archaeological evidence suggests this city had massive stone monuments, royal palaces, underground tombs, its own written language, and its own currency. An African kingdom, minting its own coins, while some of Europe was still figuring out basic infrastructure. Now, I need to be upfront with you about something. A lot of ancient Aksum has been lost. Some buildings are only foundations now. Some stories are more legend than fact. So throughout this video, I'm going to be honest with you. When something is confirmed by archaeology, I'll say so. When it's a reasonable reconstruction, I'll say that too. And when historians genuinely don't know, I'm not going to pretend we do. Because the real story here doesn't need exaggeration. It's already incredible. So the question is simple. What did ancient Aksum actually look like when it was alive? Let's go find out. Let's imagine we're not tourists. Let's imagine we're travelers arriving at Aksum for the first time, the way merchants and pilgrims actually would have. You wouldn't just appear in the city. You'd have to get there first. Aksum sits on the Tigray Plateau, highland terrain, over 2,100 meters above sea level. Cooler than you'd expect from an African kingdom this far northeast. Rolling hills, terraced farmland cut into the slopes. This wasn't flat desert. This was structured, cultivated land. Archaeological evidence shows Aksumite farmers used terracing and irrigation to grow crops on this hilly terrain, including teff, the grain still used today to make injera, Ethiopia's traditional flatbread. So next time you eat injera, you're technically eating a small piece of Aksumite engineering. As you got closer to the city, you'd likely encounter something else. Traffic, caravans, traders moving goods inland from the Red Sea coast toward the capital. Because Aksum wasn't isolated, it was a hub, a connecting point between the African interior and international trade networks reaching Rome, Arabia, and eventually India. This is where it gets interesting. Most people picture ancient Africa as disconnected from the rest of the ancient world. Aksum completely breaks that assumption. And then, you'd see it, rising above the hills. Stone monuments, some over 20 meters tall, visible long before you reached the city gates. Imagine walking for days, and then suddenly seeing structures like that appear on the horizon. That's not just a city. That's a statement. A message to every trader, every diplomat, every visitor arriving from Arabia or the Roman world. You have arrived somewhere powerful. So let's keep walking, because we're about to step inside.
Okay, we're in. Now, I need to be honest with you here. We don't have a perfectly preserved street plan of ancient Aksum the way we do for, say, Pompeii. So when I describe the streets, I'm combining what archaeologists have found: building foundations, stonework, layout patterns, with reasonable historical reconstruction. This is where evidence and imagination have to meet in the middle. Based on excavated foundations, Aksum's buildings were constructed using dressed stone, carefully cut and fitted blocks, sometimes without mortar, using a building style historians call Aksumite masonry. Wait, no mortar? Just carefully fitted stone? Meanwhile, I can't get a bookshelf to sit flush against a wall. One distinct feature researchers point to is a stepped, recessed architectural style. Walls built with alternating projecting and recessed sections. You can actually see this exact pattern echoed in the carved stelae, which appear to represent multi-story buildings using this same technique. So the stelae weren't just religious monuments. They might be giant stone recordings of what real Aksumite buildings actually looked like. That's a pretty incredible clue. Now, the marketplace. This is where Aksum would have felt truly alive. Merchants trading goods from across the region, ivory, salt, spices, cloth, glassware arriving from as far as the Mediterranean. Multiple languages overlapping: Ge'ez, Greek, Sabaean from Arabia. This wasn't a small local market. This was an international crossroads. Honestly, this might be louder and busier than my local farmer's market. And I thought that was chaotic. Somewhere in this noise, traders negotiating, animals moving through narrow paths, craftsmen working stone and metal, you'd start to understand something important. Aksum wasn't just powerful because of its monuments. It was powerful because it connected people. And speaking of monuments, it's time to look up, because we're about to see the most famous part of Aksum, the stelae. Okay, look at this thing. This is one of the giant stelae of Aksum, and honestly, pictures don't fully prepare you for the scale. The tallest standing obelisk here rises over 23 meters. That's roughly the height of a 7- or 8-story building. And it's not just a plain stone pillar. Look closer. It's carved to resemble an actual multi-story building, complete with fake doors, fake windows, and horizontal bands that likely represent wooden support beams used in real Aksumite construction. So this stelae is basically a stone blueprint of a building that might not even exist anymore. Which means this single monument might be one of our best clues to what real Aksumite architecture looked like. Wait, you're telling me these people were moving and carving stone monuments this large without modern cranes? Meanwhile, I struggle to move a sofa. Researchers believe workers used ropes, wooden sledges, and earthen ramps, moving these massive stone blocks from nearby quarries using large, coordinated labor teams. An entire logistics operation, just to put up a single monument. But now here's the part that gets genuinely humbling. Nearby lies the largest stelae ever attempted, around 33 meters long. Possibly the largest single stone monument ancient people ever tried to erect. It never made it. Archaeological evidence suggests it collapsed, either during construction or shortly after, likely damaging a nearby tomb structure in the process. And here's the frustrating part. We don't know exactly why it failed. Was it a construction mistake? An engineering miscalculation? We genuinely don't know. So this isn't just a monument to success, it's also a monument to ancient ambition and ancient failure. And honestly, I think that makes it more human. Because somewhere in history, Someone looked at this massive slab of stone and thought, yeah, we can definitely lift that. They were wrong, but they tried anyway. Now, let's go see where the people who commissioned monuments like these actually lived. If stelae were built to honor the powerful, then somewhere nearby, the powerful had to actually live. This is Dungur, one of the elite residential ruins excavated at Aksum. Now, quick honesty break. Locally, this site is often called the Queen of Sheba's Palace. It's a wonderful legend. But archaeological dating places this structure around the 6th or 7th century, centuries after any historical time frame associated with Sheba. So this probably wasn't her palace. But it was almost certainly the home of someone extremely wealthy and powerful. Archaeologists have identified multiple rooms, courtyards, and raised stone platforms here. Architecture built for status, not just shelter. And nearby, at other elite sites in Aksum, researchers have uncovered at least 27 carved stone thrones. 27. That's not one throne room. That's a whole culture built around visible, monumental displays of power. Imagine walking into a courtyard and being greeted by rows of stone thrones, each one representing a different official, noble, or ruler. This wasn't subtle power. This was power you were meant to see. Now, I want to be careful here because it's tempting to fill in every gap with imagination. We don't know the exact height of the upper floors. We don't know exactly what the roofs looked like. Wood and thatch don't survive 15 centuries the way stone does. So a reasonable reconstruction would show multi-story elite residences built on stone foundations, likely with wooden upper levels. But the finer details remain, honestly, still debated. Which is kind of incredible if you think about it. We can stand exactly where Aksumite nobility once stood and still be piecing together what they saw above their heads. But the story gets even more mysterious once we go underground. Now we go beneath the city, because some of Aksum's most important discoveries aren't above ground at all. This is a reconstruction of what's known as the Tomb of the False Door, one of several elaborate underground tomb structures found at Aksum, believed to be associated with Aksumite royalty. The name comes from a carved stone doorway inside that doesn't actually open. A false door, likely built for symbolic or religious purposes. An entrance built specifically to never be used. That's a strange and fascinating design choice. Nearby, the tomb of King Caleb, named after a 6th century Aksumite ruler, shows a similarly complex underground structure with carefully cut stone chambers and passageways. And remember earlier, when UNESCO researchers surveyed the site near the largest fallen obelisk? They discovered underground chambers and arcades that hadn't been fully explored before. Which means even now, archaeologists are still finding new parts of this city. Wait, there's still more of Aksum we haven't fully uncovered? Yes, and that's honestly one of the most exciting parts of this story. We don't know everything that's still underground here. Some chambers remain unexcavated. Some questions about how these tombs were used and by whom exactly are still debated among historians. So this part of Aksum stays genuinely mysterious. Not because historians are hiding something, but because there's simply more history buried here than we've had time to uncover fully. An entire underground world built to honor the dead, sitting quietly beneath a city built to display the power of the living. Now, let's go back up to the surface. because it's time to understand exactly how this city became so wealthy in the first place. All right, let's talk about why Aksum mattered on a global scale. Because none of those stone monuments, none of those palaces would have existed without one crucial advantage: trade. This is Adulis, Aksum's port city on the Red Sea coast. Historical sources, including a 1st century Roman travel guide called the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, describe it as a major trading hub even before Aksum reached its peak. Through Adulis, Aksum connected to an enormous trading world: the Roman and later Byzantine Empire, Arabia, India, and deep into inland Africa. Ivory, gold, incense, tortoiseshell, exotic animal skins, glassware arriving from the Mediterranean. And, being fully honest with the history here, enslaved people were also traded along these same routes, which was a documented, though difficult part of ancient economies across this entire region. Goods moved inland from Adulis to Aksum, and outward from Aksum to the wider ancient world. This is also where Aksum's currency becomes important. Archaeological evidence shows Aksum began minting its own coins in the late 3rd century, making it one of the ancient world's earliest coin-producing civilizations, alongside powers like Rome and Persia. An African kingdom, producing its own international currency while conducting trade across 3 continents. This wasn't a regional power. This was a global economic player. And check this out. Aksum was among the very first kingdoms in the world to put a Christian cross directly onto its coinage, which tells us something huge is about to happen in this story. Because trade didn't just bring Aksum wealth, it also brought new ideas, new connections, new beliefs traveling along the same routes as gold and ivory. And one of those ideas was about to permanently transform Aksum's identity. Let's talk about the king who made that happen. This is the Ezana stone, a stone inscription historians often compare to Egypt's Rosetta Stone because it's carved in 3 languages: Ge'ez, Greek, and Sabaean, which means historians could actually cross-reference and translate it with real confidence. It documents the achievements of King Ezana, who ruled Aksum in the 4th century, widely considered the ruler at the height of Aksumite power. Under Ezana, historical evidence indicates Aksum expanded its territory significantly, including conflict with the Kingdom of Kush to the west. But Ezana's most historically significant decision wasn't military. It was religious. According to historical sources, particularly the Roman writer Rufinus, Ezana's conversion to Christianity is connected to a man named Frumentius, a Christian who had close ties to the royal court and later became Aksum's first bishop. And here's what makes this genuinely remarkable. Aksum adopted Christianity in the early to mid-4th century. That's remarkably early. Around the same general period, the Roman Empire itself was moving toward Christianity. An African kingdom, becoming one of the very first Christian states in the entire ancient world. We can actually track this shift through Aksum's own coins. Earlier coins show traditional symbols, while later coins under Ezana show the Christian cross. Physical, dated evidence of an entire kingdom's identity changing in real time. Now, historians do debate why exactly Ezana made this choice. Was it purely spiritual conviction? Political strategy to strengthen trade ties with Rome? Likely, researchers believe it was some combination of both, which honestly makes it feel more real. Rulers rarely make massive decisions for just one simple reason. This decision didn't just shape Aksum. It laid the foundation for what would eventually become the Ethiopian Orthodox Church,
a religious tradition that still exists today, nearly 17 centuries later. Think about that for a second. A decision made in this exact city, still shaping millions of lives right now.
So with all these monuments, tombs, and religious history, what did ordinary daily life in Aksum actually look like? This is where we shift from kings and monuments to regular people. Based on archaeological and agricultural evidence, teff, that same grain used for injera today, was likely a staple food, alongside barley, wheat, and various vegetables grown on the terraced hillsides we saw earlier. So in a very real sense, a meal in ancient Aksum might not look wildly different from a traditional Ethiopian meal today. That's a pretty incredible through line across 15 centuries. Everyday Aksum would have included craftsmen working stone for construction, metalworkers producing tools and coinage, and pottery makers creating storage vessels for trade goods. Clothing likely reflected the region's connections to both Africa and Arabia. Woven cotton garments were common in this broader region during this period, though exact Aksumite fashion details remain an area with limited direct evidence. So here, I'll be honest. We can describe general regional clothing trends, but claiming exact certainty about what the average Aksumite wore day to day would be overstating what we actually know. Animals would have been everywhere. Cattle and goats for food and trade. Pack animals moving goods along trade routes. And social differences would have been visible everywhere too. From elite residences with carved thrones to simpler stone and wood housing for craftsmen, farmers, and laborers. This wasn't a uniform society. It was layered, much like most complex ancient civilizations. And that's honestly what makes Aksum feel real to me. Not just the giant stone monuments, but the idea that regular people were living entire lives here, cooking, working, trading, raising families, completely unaware that we'd be trying to reconstruct their world 15 centuries later. But eventually, this incredible city began to change. And that story is a lot more complicated than most people realize. Here's something important to understand. Aksum didn't just vanish overnight. That's a popular myth, but it's not what the evidence shows. The real story is slower, and honestly more complicated. Historical and archaeological evidence points to several overlapping factors. By the 6th and 7th centuries, control of Red Sea trade routes was shifting. Rising Islamic powers began controlling more of the maritime trade Aksum had relied on for centuries. Adulis, the port that once connected Aksum to the entire ancient world, gradually declined in importance. At the same time, researchers point to environmental strain, deforestation, soil exhaustion from centuries of farming, and increasingly unpredictable rainfall. Remember those impressive terraced farms we saw earlier? Over time, evidence suggests that land became harder to sustain. So this wasn't one single dramatic event. It was economic pressure and environmental pressure, arriving at roughly the same time. Historians also point to broader political shifts. Power gradually moving toward other regions of the Ethiopian highlands, away from Aksum specifically. The kingdom's influence didn't disappear. It transformed and relocated. And here's something that genuinely surprised me while researching this. Even after Aksum's political peak had passed, it remained a spiritual and ceremonial center. Ethiopian emperors continued to be crowned here, long after the city's economic power had faded. Political power moved on, but symbolic power stayed right here. Some historians even connect Aksumite architectural traditions to later achievements, like the famous rock-hewn churches built under the following Zagwe dynasty. So in a way, Aksum's story didn't really end. It echoed forward into the next chapter of Ethiopian history. Now, let's bring everything we've learned together and try to see the whole picture at once.
Okay, let's put it all together. Picture this: a city built across the highlands of the Tigray Plateau. Stone buildings using distinctive stepped, recessed architecture. Terraced farmland surrounding the city, supporting its food supply. Towering stone stelae, some over 23 meters tall, carved to mimic multi-story buildings marking royal and elite burial sites. Elite residences with courtyards and carved stone thrones. Underground tombs with false doors and hidden chambers, some still not fully excavated even today. A marketplace connected to international trade, goods, languages, and ideas arriving from Rome, Arabia, India, and across Africa. A currency system advanced enough to mint gold, silver, and bronze coins. And eventually, a royal court that adopted Christianity remarkably early, reshaping the kingdom's identity for centuries to come. Now, I want to be completely clear about something because it matters. Not every piece of this reconstruction is confirmed with total certainty. Some architectural details, upper floors, exact roofing, specific street layouts, remain based on reasonable inference, not confirmed fact. Historians and archaeologists are still working, still excavating, still learning new things about this city. Some of what I've shown you today might even be refined or corrected by future discoveries. But here's what we do know with real confidence. This was a sophisticated, wealthy, internationally connected African civilization, with monumental architecture, advanced engineering, its own writing system, its own currency, and religious influence that still exists today. Not a myth, not a legend. A real, verifiable, remarkable ancient power. Sitting quietly, waiting for more of its story to be uncovered. And that brings us back to where we started. So, what did ancient Aksum really look like? Honestly, we can't reconstruct every single building with total certainty. Some details are lost permanently, buried, collapsed, or simply never recorded. And I think that's important to say honestly, rather than pretending we have a perfect picture. But here's what the surviving evidence does give us. More than enough pieces to understand something remarkable. A major African civilization. Monumental stone architecture. Sophisticated craftsmanship. International trade connections spanning 3 continents. Religious history that shaped an entire region for centuries. Aksum wasn't a footnote in ancient history. It was one of its major chapters. And maybe that's the real point of rebuilding places like this. Not to pretend we know everything, but to respect what's actually there and stay curious about everything we still don't know. Aksum reminds us that history isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, buried, waiting, standing in stone for over 1,000 years until someone finally asks the right question. What did this place actually look like? I'm Theo, and I'll see you on our next journey through history.